Okay, so today I am working out the Chapter 4 review, all about triangles. And the first part says fully classify the triangle. So let's remember that in order to classify a triangle by its sides, our options are scalene, which means no sides are congruent, isosceles, which means two or more are congruent, and equilateral, which means all three sides are congruent. Okay, so let's talk about angles. What are our options for classifying by the angles? We've got acute, where all three angles are acute, obtuse, where one angle is obtuse, right, where one angle is right, and equiangular, which means that all the angles are equal. So if you do the math on that, if there's 180 degrees in a triangle and you divide them by three equal angles, each angle is 60 degrees. So it's also acute. So if we look at number 1 and we classify it first by its angles because that's the most obvious here, if you look at this 110, that means it's going to be obtuse. And if you look at the other two angles, the 30 and the 40, we see that none of the angles are congruent. So that means that none of the sides are going to be congruent, so this is going to be scalene. Number 2, we look and we notice that the 6s are congruent, so that means that this is isosceles. And then we look at the angles. Now on the test it will be very apparent what the angle measures are. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking that this is an obtuse angle, so I'm going to classify this as obtuse. But again, it will be very clear on the test what those angle measures are. Okay, so let's look at part 2. Part 2 says, can the given measures be the sides of a triangle? Show your work. Now, to be the sides of a triangle, the two smaller must be greater than the third side. Okay, so if you look, 2 and 3 are the smaller sides, so 5 must be greater than 6. Is that true? No, so this is not a triangle. In number 4, they're in the correct order. We do 4 plus 5 is 9, which is greater than 8. That's true. So yes, this is a triangle. Number 5, 5 and 12 are the two smaller, which is 17. 17 is greater than 13. So this is a triangle. So if you look at part 3, it says classify the triangles above as acute, obtuse, or right. Note, you cannot classify something that is not a triangle. So we are not going to classify number 3 because that is not a triangle. We can classify number 4, and the way we do that is we do c squared equals a squared plus b squared. And actually, I'm going to take that equal sign out, and I am going to replace that with a box like we did in our notes, because then we will fill that in at the end with equals, greater, or less than. C always has to be the largest of the 3, so we will put 8 squared, 4 squared, and 5 squared, and it doesn't matter where the 4 and the 5 go as long as you have the biggest in C. So we've got 64, 16, and 25. So on the right hand side we are going to get 41, and 64 is greater than 41, and the rule says that if it's greater, then this is an obtuse triangle. If it was less than, it would be acute. Okay, so looking at number 5, again, c squared has to be, or c has to be the largest side, so we will do 13 squared equals 5 squared plus 12 squared. Notice we are not solving for a variable, we're just simplifying both sides to see if it makes a true statement. And we get 169 equals 169. Okay, and actually, like I said, you could put a box here and fill it in at the end, but we do see that 169 equals 169. This is a right triangle. If it's equal, that means right. It's less than, that's acute, and if it's greater than, that is obtuse. Okay, so the next part here, Part 4 says find the value of the variable, show your work. Okay, so there are a couple things that you should be thinking as you do this section. And I'm going to make a little note over here. If you are given angles, then your options are they add up, all the angles add up to be equal to 180. Or another option is the two interior angles equals the one exterior angle. Okay, so those are kind of your options for angles. Now sometimes angles can be congruent as well, and we'll kind of talk about that in just a minute, but those are kind of the big things that should be coming into your mind. If you're given sides, you're going to look for congruent sides, and you're going to see if you can use the Pythagorean theorem. And the only time that you're going to be able to use the Pythagorean theorem is for right triangles. Okay, so let's look at some of these problems in which information is given to us. Number 6, we are given an angle measure. Okay, now if you notice, this is an equiangular triangle, which means that all of the angles are equal. Okay, so this is 2x, this is 2x. So your equation would be 2x plus 2x plus 2x equals 180. It takes 3 angles to equal 180. If you combine like terms and divide, you get x equals 30. Now, the other option is to recognize that because this is a right or an equiangular triangle, that this angle by itself has to equal 60. And if you divide that by 2, you get the same answer, 30. So either way is fine. Okay, so number 7, we are now given sides, not angles. So 180 is not even an option. Okay, so we want to see, are there congruent sides, or are we going to use the Pythagorean theorem? And in class I told you that this is a right triangle, so we can go ahead and draw that in, which means that we are able to use the Pythagorean theorem. The important part here is that C is across from the 90-degree angle. So if we do C squared equals A squared plus B squared, we plug in W, we plug in 9, we plug in the square root of 115. Now most people just type in the square root of 115 and they get a decimal. I advise that you don't, and you plug it in just like this. So you get W squared equals 81 plus the square root of 115 squared. The square and the square root cancel because they're the opposite of each other, so we just get 115. So we get W squared equals 196. And to get rid of that square, again, the opposite of squaring something is square rooting. So we get W equals 14 if you square root 196. Okay. Number 8. We are given angles. Now if they are all inside angles, then they all add up to 180 degrees. However, these are not inside angles. We only have 2 inside angles and 1 outside. But we do know that the 2 interior together equal the exterior. So 62 plus 84 equals 2x. So here we get 146 equals 2x, and if you divide, you get x equals 73. Okay, so next, I had a lot of questions on this one in class. You are given 3 angles in a triangle. What do you know about 3 angles in a triangle? They add up to be 180. So, y plus 5 plus 125 equals 180. It does not matter what order you do that in. Y plus y is 2y. 5 plus 125 is 130. If you subtract 130 from both sides, you get 50. And if you divide by 2, you get y is 25. Okay, number 10. Now, number 10 is a little bit trickier than the rest, but I always tell you guys to mark your figure with anything that you know. If you look here, this is a linear pair. These two angles should add up to be 180 degrees. So if you take 180 minus 137, you should get 43 degrees for this angle. Then you can do one of two things. You can say, okay, well, I can find the third angle, and then these two are supplementary because they're also a linear pair. Or you can say, you know what? 2 inside equal an outside. So 43 plus 102 equals x plus 10. So this is 145 equals x plus 10. If you subtract 10 from both sides, you get x equals 135. Okay, number 11. You have to recognize that this is an isosceles triangle. And if the legs are congruent, then the base angles are congruent. So if you follow the legs down to the angles, these angles are congruent. So this is also 2x. Now you have 3 angles in a triangle. You know those add up to be 180 degrees. So you get 4x equals, if I subtract 100 from both sides, 80. Divide by 4 and I get x equals 20. Okay, number 12. What do these arcs mean? It means that the base angles are congruent. And if the base angles are congruent, then the legs are congruent. It's isosceles. So these legs are congruent or equal, so we simply set them equal. We don't care about this 16, it has nothing to do with the legs. Subtract 5 from both sides, divide by 5, and you get x equals 6. 13. Again, where you're given all 3 angles in a triangle, we know that all 3 angles in a triangle add up to be 180 degrees. Just don't forget about this 90 right here. So we've got 90 plus 47 plus 5x plus 3 equals 180. So 90 plus 47 plus 3 should be 140, I believe. If you subtract 140 from both sides, you get 40. And if you divide by 5, you get 8.